There are places in this world where the veil between past and present feels just a little thinner, where history refuses to stay buried and the land itself seems to breathe with memory. Utah is one of those places, a wide, sun-bleached expanse of desert, canyon, and stone, hiding secrets older than the Mormon pioneers and darker than the legends admit. Travelers speak of unexplained lights in the sky, crosses that explode, and ancient whispers from within the rocks. In a state where ghost towns outnumber living ones and bones surface in unlikely places, the line between fact and folklore fades like twilight across the Wasatch Range. Tonight, we follow that line into the shadows, into 6 true stories that stretch belief and dare you to look away. Our first story begins not with the dead, but with the man who couldn't leave them alone. Jean Baptiste, the grave robber of Salt Lake. In the spring of 1862, Salt Lake City was still young, barely a generation removed from its founding by Mormon pioneers. But the peace of the pioneer cemetery was disturbed when a coffin was unearthed and found empty. The body had been removed, stripped of all its clothing. Then came another, and another. Word spread that someone was desecrating the graves of the newly buried. Suspicion fell on Jean Baptiste, a solitary man who worked as a cemetery gravedigger. When the local sheriff paid him a visit, what he found inside Baptiste's modest cabin shocked even the most hardened men. Piles of decaying clothing, dresses, shoes, undergarments, were heaped like laundry, some still caked with bits of flesh and mud. Baptiste admitted to stealing from over 300 graves, digging them up days after burial, and tossing the naked bodies into rivers or remote ravines. Rather than face public execution or mob justice, Baptiste was sentenced to a fate worse than death: banishment. He was taken by boat and left alone on Fremont Island in the Great Salt Lake, shackled and provisioned with minimal supplies. When officials returned weeks later, the island was silent. They found only a broken shackle, a burned-out fire, and human bones picked clean by scavengers. Some say Baptiste died of thirst or exposure. Others believe he escaped, helped by unknown forces. But even today, locals swear the wind off the lake carries whispers in a foreign tongue, and that the grave robber's soul never really left. Kay's Cross, the monument that shouldn't be. Tucked deep into the woods outside Kaysville, a strange monument once loomed, tall, silent, and seemingly forgotten. It stood over 20 feet high, a crude stone crucifix surrounded by a ring of trees and what appeared to be unmarked graves. No town records mentioned its construction. No name was ever carved into its surface. It became known only as Kay's Cross. Teenagers dared each other to visit it after sunset. The brave, or the foolish, reported the same things: a deep pressure in the chest upon crossing the tree line, strange lights dancing just beyond their vision, and the sound of breathing that wasn't theirs. Local legend claimed the site was cursed by a breakaway Mormon sect in the 1940s, who built the cross in secret, using it as a focal point for strange rituals. Some say even human sacrifice. Others tied the cross to a local man obsessed with prophecy and fire. But the most mysterious chapter came in 1992. One night, without warning, Kay's Cross exploded. Not just cracked or vandalized, but obliterated. Neighbors reported a thunderous boom and a flash of light, but when authorities arrived, there were no traces of accelerants, no footprints, no tools, just a crater where the base once stood, and blackened stones scattered like bones. No one claimed responsibility. Some believe it was an act of divine wrath. Others say it was the work of something far more ancient and far less merciful. The Mountain Meadows Massacre, ghosts in the basin. Nestled among the hills of southern Utah lies a deceptively serene patch of earth called Mountain Meadows. The silence here is heavy, like a held breath. But in 1857, this meadow bore witness to one of the most brutal and controversial events in American frontier history. A wagon train of more than 140 emigrants, mostly families from Arkansas, was moving west along the California Trail. They were tired, vulnerable, and days from safety. The group was approached by local Mormon militia who, under orders cloaked in secrecy and paranoia, allied with Paiute tribes to lay siege to the camp. After a tense standoff, the emigrants agreed to surrender under the promise of safe passage. But it was a lie. One by one, the men were separated and executed. Women and older children were shot or bludgeoned. Only a handful of young children were spared, taken in by Mormon families and returned years later. The massacre shocked the nation and left scars that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints would attempt to hide for over a century. Today, a memorial stands on the site, but many who visit say the dead are not at rest. Visitors report hearing faint weeping, disembodied voices calling out in southern accents, and the ghostly rumble of wagon wheels over hard earth. One woman claims she saw a line of people in period clothing walking silently at dusk, only for them to vanish mid-stride. Whether justice was ever served remains a debate, but no one denies that the meadow remembers. The disappearance of Elizabeth Salgado. Elizabeth Elena Laguna Salgado arrived in Provo, Utah, filled with promise and optimism. She was 26 years old, a returned missionary from Mexico, eager to master English and build a new life among people who shared her faith. For 3 weeks, she attended classes at a local language academy, walking to and from school each day. Then, on April 16, 2015, she vanished. There were no signs of a struggle, no security footage, no witnesses. Her phone went dark. For months, her family launched tireless searches, placing flyers, making TV appearances, and holding vigils. Elizabeth's story gained national attention. How could someone disappear in broad daylight in the heart of a peaceful city? In May 2018, hikers discovered skeletal remains in Hobble Creek Canyon, a rugged area just miles from where she disappeared. Dental records confirmed it was Elizabeth. The cause of death couldn't be determined. There were no suspects, no arrests. To this day, the Salgado family believes someone out there knows what happened. But some locals whisper about the canyon itself, that people vanish there more often than anyone wants to admit, that Elizabeth wasn't the first, and that she won't be the last. Skinwalker Ranch, the Forbidden Zone. Tucked in the remote Uinta Basin, Skinwalker Ranch appears, at first glance, to be just another stretch of high desert scrub. But this 512-acre property has been called the most scientifically studied paranormal hotspot in the world. Over the last 50 years, it has been the site of unexplainable phenomena so consistent, so bizarre, that even government agencies have taken an interest. It began with the Sherman family in the 1990s, who reported poltergeist activity, mutilated cattle, and the appearance of strange floating orbs. They told of a massive wolf-like creature that could not be killed by gunfire, and invisible forces that moved objects or emitted low-frequency hums that made the ground vibrate. Black triangles appeared in the sky. Beams of light shot out of nowhere and disoriented animals. Eventually, the family fled the ranch in terror. The property changed hands multiple times, eventually becoming the focus of a Defense Intelligence Agency-funded project. Scientists, researchers, and security personnel moved in. Their instruments failed without explanation. Time gaps appeared in their logs. Radiation spikes occurred in bursts, often followed by nausea or illness. What's behind it all? Alien intelligence, government technology, or something older than both? Remains an open question. But whatever the truth is, Skinwalker Ranch has earned its name. The gambling caves and alien faces on stone. In a remote cave on the banks of Utah's Great Salt Lake, archaeologists unearthed something unexpected. Inside the dark, dusty cavern were hundreds of tiny game pieces, bone dice, carved sticks, hoops and counters. Evidence of ritualistic gambling dating back to the 13th century. It wasn't just the quantity that startled researchers. It was the deliberate placement, suggesting games that weren't merely for entertainment, but tied to ceremony, perhaps even divination. These weren't just pastimes. They may have been offerings. Farther south in the sandstone cliffs of the San Rafael Swell and Horseshoe Canyon stand figures that seem ripped from a dream or a nightmare. The Barrier Canyon-style pictographs are tall, thin, faceless beings, some with massive eyes, others with antennae-like shapes emerging from their heads. Painted in deep red ochre and black, they stare across time with an eerie stillness. No one knows exactly who painted them or why. Some scholars suggest the figures represent shamanic visions, portals into the spirit world. Others claim they are evidence of early contact with something not of this earth. Whatever they are, one thing is certain: they were never meant to be ignored, and those who stand before them often feel watched. Utah is a state of extremes: towering red cliffs and bottomless salt flats, sacred shrines and silent graves. But beyond its natural beauty lies another Utah, one built of ghost stories, vanishing women, haunted symbols, and ancient warnings carved into stone. From the footsteps of a grave robber to the trails of something darker at Skinwalker Ranch, these mysteries persist, not because they can't be solved, but because perhaps they're not meant to be. In the shadow of the mountains, not all questions find answers. Some doors stay locked for a reason, and some stories don't end. Thanks for watching and wandering with us into the unknown. If tales of the strange, the hidden, and the haunted speak to you, subscribe and join us on the next descent into forgotten corners of the world. We've only just begun to scratch the surface. We have many more places to explore: ghost towns, vanished people, cursed symbols, and the stories that refuse to die. If there's a city, state, or country whose shadows you'd like us to walk through, let us know in the comments. Until next time, trust the silence, question the familiar, and remember, every place has its ghosts.